speak as a panelist, you're welcome to do that. Just let us know and we can invite you on and you can have a chat too. But first of all, Joe is going to tell us the secret of the solution to all problems for all humanity. Thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. You know, just when you say that, it sounds so grandiose, doesn't it? You know, like, oh, I found the secret to everything. But it's kind of an interesting way to say this, really. And I'm as a psychologist, having worked with these principles for the last 38 years, and having tested this with many different types of people and groups and problems and circumstances, I have to say that in the beginning I was skeptical, and now I see that this really truly is the one solution that can help everybody, whatever is going on with you in your life. So I hope you come with an open mind and just to listen, even though this might sound a little kooky to claim something so grandiose as this is the secret to everything. I'm from Minnesota, in the middle part of the United States, and where I live is the home of many Indian Native American tribes. And one of the largest tribes is the Lakota Sioux tribe. And they have I was just reminded as I was thinking about the talk today, I was reminded of an ancient story of creation that the Lakota Sioux people talk about. And in the beginning, the story goes that there were 3 gods, and they were going to create man, human beings. And they wanted to find a way to hide the truth, the secret of everything from them. And so the first God said, oh, I know where we'll hide it. We'll hide it at the top of the highest mountain in the world. It's really high up. It's very cold. It'd be really difficult to get there. Many people would die trying to get there. So I'm sure they would never look there for the secret to everything. I'm paraphrasing here a little bit.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the truth of life. But they thought about, oh, that's a really good idea. And they were sitting around the campfire. And after a couple of eons passed, the second God said, you know, that's not really going to work. Human beings are really clever, and they're ultimately going to figure out that there's a way to get up this mountain. We'll use ropes. We'll get Sherpas. We'll find some way. We're going to get up there, and we'll find the secret to everything. And they all agree that, yeah, that isn't, humans are too curious or too adventuresome. They're too curious. So they'll find a way to get there. So the second God said, I know where we'll hide it. We'll hide it at the bottom of the deepest ocean. It's really dark down there. It's miles deep. There's no way they could survive down there. They would explode from the pressure. That'll be the best place, way safer than the highest mountain. And they've all 3 then agreed that that's where we'll hide it. So they were all very satisfied. And then a few more eons passed, and the third God had been thinking and said, no, these human beings are very ingenious. They'll come up with an invention as a way to get down there to the deepest part of the ocean to find the secret to everything. I know where we'll hide it. They'll never think to look there. And they all looked at each other and, well, where's that? We'll hide it inside of themselves. They'll never think to look there. So I thought of that story as I reflected on talking to you all today about the secret of everything, the one solution to the problems of the world. Because that's what I found for myself when I first heard of this explanation of how we as human beings are engaged in our own creation, that we're part of creation, that we're actually the creators of our life, of our experience, of our perceptions, of our behavior, of our stresses, of our problems, of our achievements, of our glorious moments and our saddest moments, that's all coming from within each of us, but it's invisible. It's an invisible set of principles that are directing and creating each moment of experience that we're living in. And when I first heard this, it first helped me as a human being, not as a psychologist, not as a therapist, but as a human being, because I was experiencing a lifetime of anxiety, stress, worry, fear, insecurity. And when I first heard this, I was very, very skeptical because I'd spent many years studying many theories and become very successful at treating people with various illnesses and problems and issues, especially addiction was primarily my field I worked in. And so when I heard Sydney Banks first speak about these principles, it sounded too simple. It sounded too easy. It sounded too simplistic and grandiose. But as I went back to my life after hearing Sid the first time, I had a moment of insight, many moments of insight, you could say, where I woke up from what felt like a dream of how I was thinking and creating all of my worries, stresses, and anxieties. And in that moment of waking up from that dream, I could see that it was simply my thinking that was creating my stress about my day, about the traffic, about my relationships, about being a dad, about my finances. And so the problem wasn't all these problems. The problem was how I was relating to it with the power of my own mind and the power of thought. And that was the secret that was hidden from me. In all the theories and all the studies and all the thousands of books, I would read 5 books a week. I went to every yoga class I could find, meditation, Sufi dancing, you name it. I tried it because I was looking for something I didn't even know how to put my finger on, but I was looking for the secret of everything. And it was right inside of me, right under my nose the whole time. It was right here under my nose. And that was very humbling for me to realize that. So first thing that happened was when I first starting having insights and waking up to the fact that what my feelings were coming from was not the external, but my internal thought in the moment about all of these circumstances, my relationships, my finances, my work. And when I saw that, my shoulders immediately relaxed. I took a deep breath. I felt this relief. That was the first feeling I felt. Then I looked out my eyeballs and all the things that were on my mind disappeared. And what I saw was the beautiful drive in the car that I was having that I hadn't noticed up until that point in time. The trees were turning green. It was springtime like it is now. And that was invisible to me because I was completely preoccupied with my own personal thoughts. And it was just a glimpse. It didn't last long. Maybe 10 minutes, I felt this really good feeling. I thought, wow, this is great. I finally heard what he's saying. And then a few minutes later, it all came back. And I was all caught up in my thinking again. The stress came back. But I'd had a moment of realization that the real truth was where my thinking was coming from. It wasn't the other drivers. It wasn't what I had to do that day. It wasn't anything of the details of my life. It was coming from how I was interpreting that through the power of thought, how I was experiencing all those things through the power of my mind. And once I got that insight, it began to unravel all the problems that I had had my whole life. And I began to see that thought was always the cause and always the solution. And the solution was not changing my thinking, but just being aware of the fact that I was thinking and creating this experience. So I know that can sound like, what's this guy talking about? And it can seem a little esoteric, but it's the most practical thing that I've ever learned about helping other human beings. And it's the most practical, simple thing I ever learned about helping myself, because we all have struggles. Ever since I learned this 38 years ago, I've still had struggles in my life. I've still had problems, disappointments, curveballs, unexpected events happening that threw me off balance. So I go in and out of remembering that I'm creating my experience. But because I have had relief and the beautiful feelings that come with that relief, feelings of gratitude, feelings of ease, feelings of serenity, peace of mind. Because I've experienced those feelings, that memory comes back to that original insight more quickly. So the first person this helped was me. And throughout my life, it's helped save my marriage when we were in trouble 20 years ago. It helped me cure myself of a very immobilizing, serious, life-threatening illness just 2 years ago. Just seeing the principles of what I'll be talking to you about now literally helped me see the power of my mind to keep my body from healing itself innocently by worrying about it, terrorizing myself with the thoughts about my illness, putting them under a magnifying glass, interpreting every symptom. I had no idea I was doing it until I had a moment of insight where I realized that there were no exceptions to how our psychological principles of mind, thought, and consciousness are always creating every experience, even the fact of our own body, how our physical body feels inside, how we are built physically to, it's miraculous how the human body, and you can understand this as a physician, I believe, that the body knows how to heal itself. If you cut yourself, you just simply need to clean the wound and put a Band-Aid on it and forget about it. And a few days later, you take the Band-Aid off and that skin is healed over and there's just a little red spot. If you wait a little longer, it's completely gone. So the body is in there working, healing. It knows how to heal itself of not just wounds, but illnesses of all kinds. But with our thinking, we can interrupt that natural process of healing in the physical body. And since then, I've worked with scores of people with severe chronic illnesses who have taken this understanding of these principles to alleviate their suffering of their illness, and in some cases to have a spontaneous remission of that illness or a healing experience. I've worked with heroin addicts, alcoholics, people with every kind of addiction imaginable, and taught them these principles for the last 38 years. And the results I was getting before, using more traditional methods versus what I've been utilizing and teaching my clients and training many treatment centers around the world to use these principles, is so dramatically different. Number one, it's a painless process of counseling and treatment, rather than being torturous and difficult and getting resistance from my clients. People are open-minded. Because everybody wants to be happy, and everyone who's risked their lives using drugs and alcohol in an abusive manner has to be pretty desperate to find a good feeling. And if they only knew that that feeling was hidden within them and could be revealed to them through a deeper understanding of the principles behind the creation of the human experience through the power of the mind, the power of thought, and how we use this gift of thought, and the power of consciousness to take any thought we have and turn it into the perceptual reality we see, the physical reality we feel from our perceptions, our emotions, and all of our behavior. So initially, I applied this to myself, to the people I saw in my counseling practice, and pretty soon my practice grew dramatically. I had to start a clinic. I started training other counselors to use the same secret to everything, 3 principles approach to healing mental illnesses, addictions, and it began to kind of branch out after that. So like I had physicians who were clients, and they said, wow, we have such a burnout epidemic in the medical community. If you could teach these principles to medical students, that would be incredible. And so I got a job at the University of Minnesota Medical School. Together with a psychiatrist, Dr. Henry Emmons, we created a program called the Inner Life of Healers. And it was a program to work with medical students, pharmacy students, nursing students, to teach these principles to them before they entered into their career. And at the same time, we did retreats and seminars for people already in the profession, already burned out. And the results were extraordinary. And this later led to me working with several hospital systems, including the Mayo Clinic, and training their administrative staff, their department chairs, many of their physicians, nurses, administrators. And the results we got were pretty extraordinary. As a matter of fact, let me just read you a couple because it's so powerful. These are just quotes from people at Mayo Clinic. One woman who was a family physician, she said, "I have less distracted thinking on my mind. I have less rumination, regret, guilt, and worry. What if and if only thinking. I feel I have more focus, more attention to what is happening in the moment." This same family physician who had been working 18-hour workdays, much of it spent filling out progress notes and paperwork, but about a dozen hours seeing patients. She said, "After I learned this course, I cut my workday by 5 hours because I became way more productive, way more efficient, because I was more present. Instead of trying to do 10 things at a time, I was just doing one thing at a time. My focus was on the present moment, the patient in front of me, working on my progress notes, closing my door, not being interrupted. I would complete one task and go on to the next." That led to not only more productivity and efficiency and more sleep at night. She slept 4 more hours per night than she had been. She said, "My marriage improved, my relationship with my children, and most importantly, I'm in love with being a physician again. Before that, I was ready to quit along with the 10 others in my department who had quit the previous year from burnout." So that's just one story. Another one, I love this one, was from the director of nursing. And she said, "I feel much calmer in general. I'm sleeping better. I'm more rested. I also have better balance in my life. This program gets at the root of stress and burnout. Unlike other tools and techniques that have you cope with stress that is already created, by understanding the root of stress, my internal thinking in the moment, I am able to recognize the source of my stress in my own mind and nip it in the bud. There is no technique to do that adds more to my already busy life. Instead, I now have a way to understand what stress is and burnout actually is." So this is a really practical secret to everything. It's very pragmatic, whatever your job is, whether you're a physician or you're a clerk in the grocery store or working in customer relations at a department store. Whatever you're doing in life, your mind goes with you. And when your mind is present and it's in its natural state of resilience and calm, we just have better thinking. We're more insightful, we're more creative, and the result of that is that it's more enjoyable. So even though we might have a difficult customer in front of us that's screaming and hollering because the product that we sold them isn't working, we don't take that personally. We're able to listen better to the person, have compassion for them, and that helps the customer calm down and relax rather than getting defensive or argumentative with them. Simply calming down, the disgruntled customer goes away having a good customer service experience, and they're more likely to come back. So whether it's in a business setting, a clinical setting, in healthcare, dealing with an addiction. Another example, I was just working with a young man, a heroin addict, a few days ago, and he's a ship captain on a big ship. And so he's out at sea for 1 month, and then he comes back for 2 weeks to shore. And he was doing fine on the boat. There wasn't any drugs on the ship, and he was, getting his sea legs, so to speak, with the principles of The Secret to Everything. But he came back home, and immediately his mind started racing with urges to use drugs again. And so he was terrified of the thought of using. He'd made so much progress. He's back together with his girlfriend. He was back in connection with his family. He'd gotten his job back. His life was really on the up. And then all of a sudden these urges just started coming in his mind. And his first reaction was to run from them because he was terrified of the thoughts. So he ran from them by trying to think about something else, or avoiding people who we might run into who used drugs with him or were his dealers. So he stayed away from everybody, and he was living in fear. And so we had our counseling session, follow up after his treatment. And I said, I'll just call him Jerry, think of your urge to use heroin, to use opiates, like a bear in the woods. If you're in the woods, let's say camping or on a backpacking trip, and you see a grizzly bear, what's going to happen if you run away from that grizzly bear? Well, I suppose if I run away, he's going to chase me, and he's a lot faster than I am. I said, exactly. If you run away from your urges, or you act on your urges, that grizzly urge is going to get you. It's going to chase you wherever you go, because it is just a thought. The urge is a thought in the moment. It's just a thought. You haven't used anything yet. You have no opioids or heroin in your system. You're having the thought of it. It's bringing back some euphoric recall, some urges, some uncomfortable anxiety. It's all being created in the moment from thought. So if, like the bear, instead of running from your urge, you get calm and you don't run, you stay where you are, at some point it's going to occur to you that this thought will pass through my mind and it will get less. So if you don't run from it, it settles down. It calms down on its own without any effort on your part. Anything you do to try to make it calm down makes it bigger. It's like if you drop something in a pond that's really valuable. Let's say you have a Rolex watch or a diamond ring, and you drop it in accidentally in the pond. If you jump in the pond and you're crazily trying to find it, what's going to happen? It's going to stir up the silt, and you're not going to be able to see the ring, and you might cover it up with mud, and then it's lost. But if you wait for the silt to settle and you look at where the ring or the watch fell, you can slowly go in and pick it out and not lose it. That's what a clear mind does. When our mind gets full of stress, worry, regret, disappointment, frustration, it stirs up lots of thoughts. And when we remember that when our mind quiets, what's left is still thought, but it's thought that is responsive in the moment to the problem or the situation in front of us. It's responsive in a more intelligent way, a more insightful way, a more productive way. And what I've been teaching to all kinds of people, like I said, is what keeps them safe. Like I've taught this to police officers, firefighters, most recently, firefighters. And they report that when they're in a crisis, when their house is burning down, when they're trying to get a dying person out of an automobile accident with the jaws, and they have to remain calm. They have to remain present. If they get freaked out, they aren't going to remember what to do to save that person's life. So for them, it's a life and death secret to everything. When they as they understand that the stress and the panic isn't coming from the incident, it's coming from their thinking about the incident. That kind of reboots them, just like a computer. If you have a problem with your computer and you call Apple or whoever the service is with your computer, they'll always tell you one thing. Have you tried restarting your computer? Reboot. 99.999% of the time, that solves the problem, because the default program in the computer is perfectly designed. And the same thing is true with this mind. Our mind is built perfectly to have insight, to solve problems, to make decisions, to know how to resolve conflict, to listen to our inspiration about our career choices. A lot of you young people listening to this might be confused. What am I supposed to do in life? Why am I here? What's my purpose? God, I've got to get a job, but I hate my job that I've got. And, I thought this was what I wanted to do. How do I know what I'm really supposed to be doing? And all that anxiety and all that worry and all that overthinking is like stirring up that water. You already know in your heart what gives you joy. You just have to listen inside for that guidance. It's what I call the true north. I have a little cup here. It says True North on it. Bought it at the coffee shop the other day. We've got a compass, like a compass or a GPS built into us that always is pointing towards true north, which is the right way, the right action, the best possible response to any situation. But when we panic, like if we're in the woods and we're lost, we might run around in a circle. A couple of years ago, I was out on my lake in the middle of the Minnesota winter, and I was going back to the landing on my snowmobile. And as I turned the bend, I was in the middle of a whiteout snowstorm. I couldn't see 10 feet in front of my snowmobile. It's the middle of the day. I thought, it wasn't snowing that hard when I left, and all of a sudden it was just a whiteout. I thought about going back, but then I couldn't even see my tracks anymore because the snow was coming down so hard I couldn't. So I just kept going, and I didn't have a compass. Bad idea. So I ended up, after an hour of driving and thinking I was going in the right direction, I had made a complete circle and was right back where I had started. Panic ensued. I felt, I was going to get lost. It was going to be 20 below zero Fahrenheit that night. Am I going to die? All of those thoughts came to me. But I didn't have a compass in that whiteout. If I'd had a compass, I would have known I was going in the wrong direction. Fortunately, this compass in here, you can't ever forget it. It's always in there. You can't lose it. You can ignore it. You can not know how to hear it, but it's always there. And that's that inner guidance system that you can call it intuition, you can call it an inner knowing, you can call it insight in the moment, but there's an intelligence that's built into us as human beings to help us survive, to help us heal, to know our direction in life, what our purpose is, to know how to find the right person to have a relationship with, to sort our way through what's a really complex situation that we human beings are in right now. We're in a very complex world of technology and internet and infinite choices and infinite freedom in many ways, but so many choices that we get confused often because we haven't learned how to listen to this compass. So what does that mean, to listen to your compass? So when, you know how sometimes you have a problem and it's on your mind, you're trying to figure it out and trying to figure it out, and it's just, you're kind of obsessed with it. And then you go for a run, or you're taking a shower, or you're going for a swim, or you're doing something that takes your mind off of the problem. Have you ever noticed that sometimes out of the blue, the solution to that problem will pop into your mind when your intellect isn't doing this about the problem? When you let go of the problem, you often get an insight. It's not something you can control. You can't make an insight happen. You can't push a button that says insight on it. But if you let go of the problem, get away from it, go do something else with it not being on your mind, it'll often pop up out of nowhere. I love studying the history of science and inventions. And if you look at most of the inventions that happened, they were by accident. Like the photography in France was discovered in France. I can't remember the guy's name, but he had tried and tried and tried to use these plates, these glass plates, to get exposed to light, and he'd have to let them sit at a particular place on a very still platform for like 8 hours to get an exposure. But it was still really murky and you couldn't really make out the images. It wasn't very good. And he would take these plates and he would put them in a closet, a dark closet in between, and hope that it would develop itself over time. Well, one time he had a jar of mercury that was open. It was in that same closet, and it accidentally spilled. And the fumes of the mercury got in the atmosphere, in the air of that closet. And when he took that photograph out, it was a almost perfect black and white photo. Voila, he had discovered the key to photography. Now, he'd been working on this for years, but through serendipity, he realized what caused it. He had an insight, what caused that film to develop. And from there, now of course we have our little iPhones, and we can take incredible photos from anywhere in the world, videos of high quality resolution, and we can store. I have 44,000 photos and videos on my little phone. This is ridiculous. That's just in the last 150 years. We've come from not being able to take a photo to being able to take photos of the Earth from the edge of the solar system with the Hubble, or with the, what was it, the Explorer, or whatever it was that recently went to the edge of the solar system and took a picture of the Earth. And just this little tiny dot of the Earth in the middle of an infinitely large universe that is one of many universes, billions of universes. Kind of put things in perspective. So when I work with scientists teaching these principles, I work with the research department at Mayo Clinic, and the head of research said, learning about the secret of everything, these, what we call the resilience principles. He said, I think, see if I have his quote here. He said, the principles I learned at the seminar come to me at tough times and in crucial conversations. I know when I react emotionally, just pause, reflect, and I naturally see the situation from a calmer and wiser perspective. And he also shared with me that in doing his research, he said, this is the secret to coming up with new solutions. Researchers tend to study what they're already familiar with, and they don't look outside of the box. Understanding how our mind can confine us to a certain box of thinking keeps us in this limited reality of thought that keeps us from seeing the new invention, the new discovery of the new medication or surgical technique or whatever that is going to take us to the next level of medicine. This, he said, if I got nothing out of this course for myself, it will completely change my research from this point going forward. So this simple understanding, and I know in some of the other webinars you've listened to, maybe people have gone through that, and maybe you can tell me how much, if it would be helpful to explain a little bit about what is the secret of everything. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's yes, people have gone into detail in other webinars about exactly what those are. So people, if they haven't heard before, can go back and listen to some of those other sessions, and I'll put links with this one to do that rather than go over it again, because I think what you're describing and the examples that you're giving are much more helpful than to go back into it in great detail. And I was just, when you were talking just now about outside the box and how that gives us the opportunity for new inventions and I was thinking that that's also what people are looking for how we're going to solve global warming and terrorism and all the big problems that people see in the world. So when I first said, this is the solution to all problems in humanity, it really is. It's like, not that we have a solution here and now, but that we as human beings, through the capacity that we have to hear new thought and to be in touch with that, have, like you said, have everything we need to find those solutions. Much better than if we're worrying about them and getting upset about them, and which is what most people tend to be doing. Yeah. Sorry. I was just going to say, so nobody's asked any questions just now, but I'm just reminding people that if there is anything that you want to ask, just type in the chat box that you would like to ask a question. And if you'd like to, you can put your hand up too. There's a way to put your hand up and you can come on and speak to us if you'd like to. So,
let me address the point of global warming, because I think that's that's something near and dear to me. I have a dear friend who is a world-renowned explorer of the Arctic and the Antarctic. He's been to both poles many, many times, and so he's been an eyewitness to global warming long before it was popular or even an issue on the minds of people. For the last 45 years, he's been going there. And he started seeing in the Inuit people, the native people, that they had to move their villages because they could no longer hunt because the warming had affected the seals and the whales and the caribou herding and all of that. And so he's been a spokesperson nationally and internationally to help. He helped reinstate the treaty for Antarctica, all the countries that had mining rights in Antarctica, and he got President George H.W. Bush to sign the treaty. Was the last holdout of all the nations to sign it by his explorations in Antarctica. And he started a global think tank that he's built in the wilderness to bring together leaders from politics, industry, climatologists, education. So thought leaders from lots of different fields, and to bring them together in small groups of 12 people to come up with decisions, people who are stakeholders from industry, the energy companies, and one of his main sponsors is the largest energy company in the Midwest that supplies all of our electricity. They're now going completely coal-free by 2030. They're already 75% of the way there, which is amazing. But so I've talked with him about helping to facilitate those groups to help people understand these principles in a way to help them listen to each other beyond their own personal interest, to actually hear the interest in how we can come up with one solution that everyone is a winner. The environment, the energy companies, the politicians who might be on both sides of the argument, to help bring people together in an environment where they can actually hear each other, communicate unemotionally and more objectively about something that we have to have an understanding of collectively in order to save the planet. So, and I know Rudy Kennard, who's another major person in the three principles, has met with climate change leaders to help them, because they were getting so burned out and frustrated because the time is running out and people aren't listening, and how do we get people? And they were really, a lot of them were burning out from stress and worry and just panicking that no one's listening, we can't get the politicians to hear us, and da 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 da. And so he worked with them to help them get an understanding so that they could stay in the fight, stay on the front lines of this, and not burn out, to keep their spirit and their enthusiasm and their conviction going by understanding how their own mind was creating their discouragement, their stress, their kind of cynicism. Many people who are engaged in movements become very cynical, whether I've worked in the civil rights movement and a long time ago, worked in many movements, and people just burn out right and left because they don't know how this works. So they get discouraged. So understanding how the mind creates our moment-to-moment perception of life subjectively through the filter of our own personal thinking, and that perception leads to our emotions simultaneously. The body is a printout of perception through the sensations and changes in heart rate and respiration rate and galvanic skin response and our EKG and all of those things that physicians know about, how all the functions of the body are all a printout of the quality of our thinking in the moment. And when we see the connection between how we're thinking and using this gift of thought in the moment and how we're feeling is almost a guidance system. It is the compass that lets us know when we're caught up here and when to let it go and get our bearings back and get back to the resilient state of mind, the clear water where we can see the solution to whatever the problem is, whether it's a personal health issue, an addiction, global warming, getting legislatures or parliament to get along with each other and hear each other's differences instead of screaming at each other. And that'll be the one. I'll leave that one up to you. So does anyone have any questions at this point?
Yes, one person would like to come and speak.
Okay.
Let's see if we can. Wait a minute, I can't. This is me trying to work out how to. Okay. Now to talk. And would you? I'm letting you come on, Jessie.
Sure.
I hope that's okay.
Hi, Jessie.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
yes, Jessie, I can hear you loud and clear.
Wonderful. So I'm.
One second, you're just coming on me.
Oh,
Sorry.
now, okay. I lost you for a second there because your video was coming on. Go ahead.
Oh, sure. So I'm a researcher at the University of Minnesota, and I work in family social science. We have some couple and family therapists in our department, and I just see such power of this understanding for those who are in academia. I'd love to know a little bit about your experience in sharing the secret with people who have years and years and years of mental health training and how that's received. And do you find it takes more time, or do you have to have a different approach for them to kind of unlearn years of training and mentoring, kind of an opposite way of how we think about mental health?
Well, that's really interesting, Jessie, that you're asking this question from Minnesota. is that before I learned these principles, I was trained as a family therapist by Virginia Satir, and one of the pioneers in family therapy. And Carl Whitaker was my supervisor, another very well-known family therapist. My partner was a leader in family therapy, and she taught it in your program.
Oh, no way.
Dr. Marilyn Mason. And it was fascinating to me because, of course, I wanted all my colleagues, once I heard this, even though I was in the very beginnings of learning this, I wanted to share this with everybody because this, my burnout went away. I was getting so much better results. My clients were getting well in a matter of months rather than years. They were the couples I was working with, they would walk out of their sessions into the waiting room where everyone else, all the other 30 therapists were coming up. They're all crying and mine are laughing and holding hands. And pretty soon, the other clients who were waiting for the other therapists were asking our therapist, so why are you so happy? He changed what he was doing and it's so much more helpful. And so I ended up getting a lot of their clients. And so they were like curious, and then I tried to explain it, and they were going, "What? Oh, Joe, you're in denial. What are you smoking something? Are you joined a cult or what?" It was really, really a difficult audience, and I had no way of articulating it at that point. I was just very new, and I had changed, but I didn't have words for it. I hadn't written anything about it. And I was part of. So I met with Carl Whitaker, who was at the University of Wisconsin, for our next supervision session, and Marilyn and I, who was my partner, she didn't know what to do with me because we were co-therapists doing family therapy, and like, "What are you doing now, Joe? How is this going to work?" And so Carl is this Dr. Whitaker is a brilliant guy. He's passed now, but he said, "Joe, it sounds to me like you've had a paradigm shift." And he sent me Kuhn's book on paradigm shifts. And so that was the last time I saw Dr. Whitaker. And Marilyn, my partner, coincidentally got offered a job to teach in Santa Cruz, University of California in Santa Cruz 2 months later. And so everything fell into place. But it was a long time before I was able to really articulate this to therapists trained in a more traditional models, because I was too evangelical. In a way, I was just like, man, this is what we've all been looking for. This is the answer. And of course, it came off as really flaky and irrelevant, et cetera. Right. So I had to start collecting data and research, and but I would still say that that's probably, understandably, one of the most difficult audiences that I speak to is when I work with therapists who are already doing cognitive behavioral therapy or family systems, or they've already worked for years to study something and they're an expert at it. It's a threat to them. Mm-hmm. But what I have found, like, I remember even, this is my first book that I wrote, was The Serenity Principle, and Hazelden, Hazelden,
I do,
was going to publish it, and it was about the principles applied to addiction. And so they were going to make it the book of the year at Hazelden. It was on the cover of their catalog. And 3 weeks before it was to be published, I met with Dr. Anderson, who was the founder of Hazelden. I went out to Center City and spoke with him, and I said, I thought I'd better meet with you because this could be really controversial. He said, "Well, didn't you get our letter?" And I said, "No, I didn't." He says, "Well, we're not going to publish your book." What? I said, "It's supposed to come out in 3 weeks. What do you mean?" He says, "Well, we sent out review copies to all of our counselors at Hazelden. And they said, if you publish this book, this is heresy, we'll all quit." 40 of their counselors said they would quit en masse.
Wow.
And I said, and I never thought I was ever going to write a book. And finally I write a book, and now they're not going to publish it. It was really weird. And so I said, "So what did you think?" He said, "I loved your book. I think it's the future. It's 20 years ahead of its time, but it will unify all the addiction treatments and mental health. It will show how they're all, it's a one solution to all of these issues. instead of having discrete separate programs for dual diagnosis and heroin addiction and alcoholism and, opiate, we could bring it all together, and it would also be the solution for prevention and for relapse prevention. He says, but you're just 20 years ahead of your time.
Oh my gosh. How interesting.
So the guy who had initially asked me to write the book was a small little publisher in Golden Valley. In the meantime, he had gotten bought out by HarperCollins, the largest publisher in the world at the time. And so I called him because he was the one that encouraged me to write the book in the first place. He said, you need to share this with the field. And so I called him and he said, well, I'm editor-in-chief at Harper and we love controversy. It sells books, so we'll publish your book.
Oh,
so
good.
I ended up, I never thought I'd ever write a book. Person writes a book and I get the #1 publishing company in the world to publish my book.
Wow. Oh, what a story. Wow.
So paradigm shifts do not happen easily. When Semmelweis discovered the germ, he never could see it because there weren't microscopes that could see it, but he knew it because there was something on that scalpel that gave his friend that same disease that the mothers who were dying of childbirth infections were getting. Childbirth infection, I think it's called. Is it birth? What's the name of it, Anne? Can't hear you.
No, I know. I just switched it back on again. I can't think either now.
Anyway, whatever it is, it was germs, because they would cut the cadavers up in the afternoon and then go deliver babies in the morning and cut the umbilical cord with the same knife.
Yikes.
They didn't know. They had no idea they were actually killing a lot of women innocently. And he saw the connection and he tried to convince them, and they ran him out. He was the medical director. They fired him from the organization. He died in an insane asylum. Never was able to convince people. It took the next generation of teachers in the medical schools, once they got the science of it, to train the next generation of doctors. And then people started washing their hands and using sterile instruments. But it took about 40 to 80 years before that was accepted in the medical community. And that's typical for any paradigm shift. It's between 40 and 80 years before it gets adopted by the academic community. So academics are the last usually to get the advancements.
That's what I'm finding. Well, I'm more on the research side, but even talking with friends, there's a lot of resistance already. And granted, there's difference between like a friendship and more of like a more professional type of a relationship. But I was just curious about your thoughts on that. And those are some very interesting stories you have about the resistance and where you find people are willing to publish and share things.
Yeah. But, I think it has enough, like at Mayo Clinic, this was in Scottsdale where I did the work there. They did a research study of it, and they found like 78% of the people who went through the program reported a great reduction in their stress.
Wow.
Just from attending the program. 92% said they would recommend the course to other physicians.
That's amazing.
72% said they experienced less emotional reactivity to adverse circumstances in their life. And it just goes on and on. The results are amazing. But, in this program we're doing now with first responders, we're doing all the research on it. We're finally getting it. We got to have data. If we don't get data, no one's going to listen to anything but data. And so there's a woman, Jean Catherine, who will be in London. Do you know who Jean Catherine is?
I'm familiar with her, yes.
Yeah, so she's spearheading a lot of research projects in London with the homeless, in the prisons in the UK, with the firefighters in Charlottesville, Virginia. The program, we're going to now train all the firefighters in the entire department. We did one pilot with the first group. They loved it. So now we're doing everybody. And hopefully we'll do the fire. So, but research is the only thing people are going to listen to, because it's such a different paradigm that, like when I talk to a lot of therapists, they say, well, this is just cognitive therapy, or this is just, and you try to explain how it's different, and it's just hard because, like me, I was invested in what I was already doing. It was hard. I wanted to run out of the room. I was terribly threatened by hearing this. I had spent 10 years studying with the best people in the field to be the best, right? And everything Sydney Banks was saying completely pulled the rug out from everything I'd been doing for 10 years. And most people that heard Sid and my colleagues, they just said, well, this is a great idea. I really respect you, Joe, but, I've got kids to put in college. I've got I need people who are going to stay in therapy for a long time, or I can't pay the bills.
Right. It's not a good business model.
It's not a good business model. So anyway.
Thank you so much.
Jesse, we'll have to get together since we're neighbors practically.
Yes, I would love that.
That's so cool that how did you find out about this?
About this series, I literally saw a post on Facebook yesterday, randomly in one of the 3 principals groups.
Wow. Weird.
And I put it on my calendar, and I was like, hey, I don't have anything going on. So I just figured I'd hop on. This is wonderful.
Yeah, I'm right in South Maplewood, just down the road.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'll have to shoot you an email or something. We could grab coffee or something like that.
Now, this is how it happens. The law of serendipity. These are the coincidental things, like getting with HarperCollins. And Mayo Clinic, same thing. How the hell did I ever get in the door of Mayo Clinic? Yeah. That's another whole story.
It's really cool. Really cool.
So,
yeah.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's 2:00. I don't know how many people are still there. I guess 7 people. Are there any other questions? Hi, Marie Engel. And I see a Debbie in there, and an Essie, another person I know. Does anybody have any other questions?
Not that I can see at the moment. One of the reasons that I started this whole project was because, having been a medical student myself and seeing how unhappy and how much struggle there was in medical students. And just recently I was talking to someone who said that their grandson, I think, is a medical student at the moment, and they expect at his medical school, they expect at least 2 suicides a year in medical students. Wow. So I'm like, wow. Yeah, that's terrible.
Wrong.
And it was bad enough. I mean, the pressures that we experienced, and that we then experienced as junior doctors and in hospitals, and everybody, well, not everybody, but nearly everybody just wanted to get out, but didn't know how. And hearing you, I was just almost in tears when you said that the doctors that you helped didn't want to get out anymore, that they could do their job and enjoy it and not want to get out. So that's wonderful.
That it's not the only solution to burnout. There's a lot of ways the system is organized that is really very, there's a lot of stressors that are unnecessary, and that can be changed. And Mayo was very clear that they were working on the external solutions, but also without working on the resilience of the physicians and the nurses. They didn't have access to creative thinking and to innovation to see a better path forward. And so it had to begin with the state of mind of their healthcare providers and their leaders. Mostly we started with the leaders, and it was interesting during the 4-year pilot, the burnout rate went down 12.5% for their whole system of 6,000 employees.
Wow.
In Scottsdale. But we only worked with about 200 people, but they were mostly leaders in the organization. So there was that trickling effect, because the state of mind of the leaders changes. It affects everybody, how the meetings are run, how discipline is carried out, just more innovation, creative thought processes, because people were more resilient.
Yeah. So unless there are any more questions, I just wanted to say, well, thank you very much, Joe. That's brilliant. And there will be links on our website, which is thesecretofeverything.com, to Joe has his own page on there, so there'll be links to where he is and how you can get in touch with him and how you can find out more about him. Also, Joe has also written several more books, which are also really brilliant, so well worth reading. And there will be links to more of your videos and other resources that people can find out, because that's like only the tip of the iceberg, really, of all the things that you've shared.
I'm currently working on 2 books. One is on The Resilient Healer, which is about burnout, and the other one is called The Transformation Principle, which is seeing how transformation happens. What's the common thread in transformational experiences, whether it's in addiction, mental health, physician burnout, etc. So I'll have stories from all different walks of life, as well as historically looking at people like Nelson Mandela and his experience of awakening, and Gandhi and lots of people, and explaining it through these principles. So that's what I'm working on this summer.
Fantastic.
And my website is all under construction, going to be completely redone, and my YouTube channel now, I'm in the process of redoing all of that.
Okay. But we'll be linking up to all of that in any case.
Okay.
So,
Good.
and this project, although the live events are going on for 2 months until the end of June, the videos will be available forever. So people will still be able to watch the replays and get the links from those if they're watching on replays and so on. And they can ask questions through that too, through the website and through YouTube and so on as well. So thank you very much. That's been absolutely fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Well, thank you for all you're doing, and to, just the tireless work that you're doing to organize all of the research and all the articles and the websites and the books and everything about 3 principles. It's just a real work of love that you're doing there. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I hope to see you again soon. Thanks very much, Joe.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, everybody. Bye.